Hi, Megan. How are
Hi,
you?
Alex. I'm good. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Oh, no problem. I
Next.
loved the special. Like, I actually watched it twice, probably within
Wow.
a week's time, because I watched it the first day it came out, and then I made my parents watch it because I'm like, you've got to see.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah, I just loved it. And actually, I was talking about it. It was a family affair. I was talking about it with my brother too, like how funny it was and raw and emotional, and it's just fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, since this is probably his most, I'd say, personal stand up to date, what was it like to collaborate with John on this? Like, what did you guys talk about? Like, what you wanted to achieve with, I mean, I guess it's not achieve, but like what you set out, what were your goals with it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's exactly where we first began was sort of, he was touring the show for about 2 years. And so he kind of, it had gone on this huge evolution and he was playing these arenas. And so we were talking about, well, what do you want this to feel like? And it felt like since it was personal, intimacy was really important. I mean, he wanted it to feel very different from the previous special we did together, Kid Gorgeous, which was really about like scope. And and so it was, first off, a big decision just to think about what room to play. You're like playing Madison Square Garden, and then you're like, I want to play Boston Symphony Hall. And so that was the first thing was like intimacy, the as you said, like feeling really personal, feeling really dynamic, being able to show the scope because that's a beautiful room, but also make it feel really intimate and personal, and actually getting like a steady cam up on stage, doing things like that, which I've never explored before in a special. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're like all around him too. You're like in front, behind, and just like you're really, it really adds to the intimacy, I think, of it.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
glad you felt that way. Yeah. I mean, the dream, of course, is like we knew what it was like to be in Boston Symphony Hall that night watching the show. And how do you convey that to an audience at home and make it feel as visceral and dynamic? Yeah.
Even the fact that you can like you can't really see the audience, that also adds to the intimacy. And which I have a question about that actually with
Yeah,
um
totally.
with with the kid in the audience.
Mhm.
um I was thinking like we don't see him, but like did you think about having like filming this kid? I mean, I know he was probably like part of the show, but like did you feel like it would take away from the spontaneity and make it feel more staged if you had like you showed that interact, like showed the kid, showed him back and
Well,
forth?
I honestly, this is probably a failure of me. We did our best to show the kid. That was spontaneous, and we had no idea it was happening or where this
Oh, it
kid would
was
be.
spontaneous? It
And so
wasn't
we
like a
were like in
plan?
the control room. We were like, "Find the kid. Where's the kid?" And
Oh
he was
my
in
god.
the second or third row of the balcony, and it was really dark. And so we were ourselves like sort of fishing for him, being like, "What?" And so we did our best, but, but yeah, that was not planned.
Oh my gosh. Well, I know I thought it worked out because then it would kind of take away from like if you did have like if you got there, maybe it would feel like that it was more planned and stuff, but I
Yeah,
thought it
yeah.
really worked because
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
The sound designer was amazing, and he had like something like over 100 mics scattered throughout the room, so we were able to at least pick out his voice a little bit and stuff like that. But yeah, yeah,
Oh, that is so funny.
yeah.
Obviously you have a background in musicals. Do you take the same approach with like Broadway as you do comedy, or is it like kind of different?
A little bit, particularly this one, because there's like such a story to the show, right? And to what John's doing. So we really talked about, like going on like a real journey. And so one of the things we did, and I love to talk about the production design and stuff too, but like one
Yeah.
of the things within the production design we buried this like neon LED, this thing we call Neoflex. I use a lot in like Moulin Rouge and the show I'm doing this summer on Broadway too. And it is really like sort of transformative and contemporary and like exciting. And so we wanted to build like this journey that takes us from a state where you feel like you're just in sort of Boston Symphony Hall, what it would normally look like, and then suddenly kind of kicks up into color and then into saturation, and then takes you and then sort of mirrors the structure of what John's doing. So when you're going from intervention into rehab, there's a shift there, back into New York, et cetera. And then I think landing us in a place that feels kind of hopeful and joyous and uplifting and feels like a little bit like a return to the space we started. So definitely mapping that out was a key thing. And that's a very, yeah, theatrical idea.
That's so interesting. Did any colors like correspond with certain parts of the story? Did you have it like timed where like blue, I think maybe blue.
Yeah. We definitely had our cues that like, we were like, this looks like, this is like the Rolex watch cue. And that was like purple and orange. And then, when he was dealing with a doctor in the really intimate scene where he goes and visits the doctor's apartment, it was like red and white. And that felt kind of like, edgy and right for that. And then, when he's in New York, it's like at night, it's a kind of this blue azure look. So it's like that kind of like, yeah, that's sort of the thinking behind that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
You kind of spoke to this already, but given that this is like John Mulaney 2.0, I guess, and he even says so, like, I'm new, like this is new me. Like, did you use any new, more like intimate angles? I feel like there was different angles with this that we
Yeah.
hadn't seen from him before. Like maybe like he he looked bigger in some way, like the way it made him look like we're looking up to him a little. I don't know. It was really interesting the way I thought the angles looked different.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, we had like a ton of coverage, which was great. And we shot over 3 performances, so we were able to shift that between shows
Oh,
and
that's great.
stuff like that as well. One of the things that Boston Symphony Hall allows you that Radio City doesn't is immediately your cameras are able to be closer, and so it feels more intimate. We were able to get a steady cam up on stage. We had that rail cam, which you're talking about, which is that like low angle shot, which is kind of heroic, and that feels in a way grand, but also very intimate. And then we always wanted to kind of like find ways to acknowledge the audience and remind yourself like the kind of the heat and electricity of what it is to be in that room. So like we for our dolly we had heads in the foreground, so it makes you feel like you're in a seat in the theater, in a great seat in the theater watching the show. And so that's as we were trying to be dynamic, we were also trying to really like situate you in that space and what it felt like to be there on that February night.
Wow. And so you shot over three. I didn't realize you shot over three
Yeah.
nights. So were there certain aspects of the show that you wanted to incorporate for, or like that it changed, or like I'm sure every night's different. What kind of challenges did that present?
Well, that's actually one of the most exciting parts is so as John like knows his material so well, knows what it felt, is really keen on the relationship with the audience and like is very keyed into like how that's going. And so you sort of build the body off of like he's like, this was the performance I love that feels like it has the most fidelity to the thing that I've created and I want to. So you sort of work off that. And then he's like, but I really liked how that worked in the third show, or like, that thing where I did that thing where I had that moment and I saw that audience member and they did that. I like that from the first show. So that's sort of how the editor was this woman, Kelly Leon, who's amazing. She's out of Portland. She used to work on SNL with John. And so she really started building this thing out with John's preferences. And then in the post process, we were able to like kind of swap things in, swap things out, shift things around. There's a level of fluidity. But John's just such a like masterful writer, that he like really has a sense of how to balance the storytelling, the comedy and the performance, and like has a great sense of like what works and what to throw away.
That's great. I love how this is really funny, but the credits come up like 10 minutes into the
Oh
into
yeah,
the
yeah,
set.
yeah.
I love that because it's like, oh wow, and it's almost like a reset. And I was wondering if you could talk about like how were you worried about disrupting that flow in there? Like, because he is kind of on to something, and then it's like, okay, here's what happened. And then
Yeah.
it's kind of like, did you yeah, what was the decision there to have the credits there?
Well, so that's a great question. One of the things we wanted to do at the top was dispense with like a cold open, which we did for Kid Gorgeous, and a lot of comedy specials do, and just like kind of jump into the material and jump into the story. We already knew it was going to be kind of a longer special, it's 80 minutes instead of like a 60, 65. And so we wanted to kind of get into the meat of it. And we knew people would want to be hearing what John's talking about. And then we knew there was also a shift from a kind of more traditional stand-up to the story of the night. And so it felt like that would be a good place to kind of like hook you in the beginning and then have a sort of page turn into the thing. But so that was kind of like the thought going into Boston Symphony Hall, but we had like also plan B, plan C, plan D, because we were like, this is kind of crazy. This might not work. And then we got into the editing process and we're really excited by it. And it felt like really kind of fun and surprising and whimsical and kind of sort of impactful, being like, here's what happened, boom, and then we're into the special. So we were happy that it turned out okay. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I loved it. Yeah, it was kind of because then it becomes like it starts out something else and then it becomes all about his
Yeah.
intervention. So it's like you almost needed that. Like, okay, let me get
Yeah,
into the
it
story.
feel like the first 10 minutes feel like Kid Gorgeous or New in Town or something, one of the other things. And then, yeah, you're right. And then it's like, okay, 2.0, here we go.
Yeah. How do you envision your collaboration with him, like, and then the next one? Do you think, like, is this a different John Mulaney, and how do you envision his comedy and your relationship evolving together?
I feel just really lucky to get to sort of be in his creative orbit. You know, we first worked together on a Broadway show called Oh Hello with Nick Kroll, who's one of his like great collaborators.
Yeah,
And that was really, really fun because they were so excited about being on Broadway. And, you know, I'm a big believer in like that there's space for comedy on Broadway. I did the Pee Wee Herman show years ago, and like
so cool.
I love that, and it works. And so then getting to direct his first special was a real step outside of like where I normally operate, and he wanted that kind of the sort of theatricality and showmanship from that world brought into that. So I feel like very lucky that like each, and then obviously Baby J was wanted to be really different from Kid Gorgeous. So I feel just lucky I feel like I learn something every time I work with him. So I feel, yeah, excited and lucky. Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for
Yeah.
this. And thank you so much for the special. Absolutely loved it. So, yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Have a wonderful weekend.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.